front two lean-to extension. Again, these are the existing floor plans and elevations of the building that's currently there on the site at the moment. But as I said before, this is currently unauthorised. So this is currently, as I say, what's there at the moment. And as you can see, this is an aerial photograph of the site of the existing building. So as you can see, the works have already been carried out, including the roof lights and the alterations and so forth. This is just a series of aerial photographs of the site going back from 2012, going backwards, showing the previous building on the site. So you can see over the course of the year, so 2012, if I can, so this is the building here. As you can see, this is before the works were carried out to the building. This is back in 2009, again, some of the works are there. 2001, and also 1999 as well. This is the proposed floor plan and elevations of the building, so we can see, as I say, what has been proposed. So we've got the proposed timber glazed front doors. We've got the small front lean-to extension, and the individual roof lights for both of the units, with the internal dividing wall and both of the workshop doors. And again, the proposed site layout plan, and as I say, there's no changes to the vehicle access into the site. That will remain as existing. This is a series of photos which show the building itself. The previous building, which, as I say, has now since gone. So we can see it was in a poor state of repair a number of years ago. Again, this is the building itself. Just to clarify, the height of the building in this particular of the previous building is 3.1 metres, and that is exactly the same as the height of the building which is currently there at the moment. And again, the pictures of the previous building are on site as well. And this is the building, as I say, which is currently existing, and as I say, currently unauthorised. We can see the alterations have been carried out. So we've got the timber cladding on the side and the changes to the roof structure. So when I say changes, I mean alterations to the roof structure. I don't mean a brand new roof structure. I don't need to go into that. I think I've set out the term and the issue, so I'll pass you back to back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, William. Members. Jenny.
Thank you, Chairman. William, do you think we could just have a slightly longer look at the photograph just before the existing building photographs came? Sorry, no, go forward now. Forward. That's it. Thank you. I just didn't get a very long look at that. Okay.
Mr. Gates.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is a long-standing matter. I think it was first brought to the attention of the Council when the new building suddenly appeared without authorisation, and this building, whether the new building, proposed building, is materially larger than the previous pole barn. It is materially different, that I do accept. I don't think anybody can deny that. But is it materially larger? I'm therefore going to cut to the chase and ask the officers a question. The previous building, by which I am assuming that on page 17, that refers to that one we're looking at there, is given by the officers with a floor area of 197.63 square metres, correct to the nearest square centimetre. I wonder if the officers could explain precisely how that calculation was done. When I've heard that explanation, I will balance it against the many other views that are held, although not based on the particular photographs, but the other views that are held, that the new building is materially larger. I accept it is materially different, but I think it is for the officers to convince us that it is not materially larger, hence the need for my better understanding of how that calculation is done, because without that we're relying upon, on the one hand, historical remembrance of what it was. The applicant has not provided plans of the original building, and I think it is more for the applicant to prove this, and reference was made to photographs that arrived this afternoon. They're not referred to in the update sheet, and unless those are the photographs that have suddenly been prepared and are with us, they were not in the report. So I think we're entitled as members to understand how that conclusion is reached. Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to comment on the other aspects at this stage.
Thank you very much. Harry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If my voice goes, it's because I'm suffering with a chest infection, so you'll have to bear with me. How we've arrived at it, we've looked at aerial photographs going backwards. So I'm afraid the computer's working rather slow. So looking at the aerial photographs we have here, going all the way back to I think it's 1999, is it William? Yeah. Looking at that gives us an indication of the footprint of the building. As you can see, the footprint of the building, in mind of the officers, has not materially changed. That footprint is exactly the same. Taking that into account also with the historical photographs, we know, for example, that this stanchion we have in the middle is the stanchion which is there now. We can use that as our reference point, as a way of measuring the sides of the building, and looking at the aerial photographs of the proposal through time, looking at the features we have in front of us, we are confident that the existing building plans which we have on file are near as damn it to that existing building that was there in 1999. From not the way it looks, I agree, materially different the way it looks. It's materially more substantial than what it was, but from a materially larger point of view, those existing plans that we have on the file, we think are near as damn it as what the building measurements are in front of you now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry. Did you want to come back now, Mr. Gates?
Well, I suppose to ask another question, really, when we talk about larger, of course, we're not just talking about footprint. Were you able to assess from these photographs that there had been no material change to the volume of the building? I accept that your point about the front, and having been on at least, well, certainly one site visit and certainly informal visits, I accept the point you are making that the stanchion is the same as the one that was there originally, because we visited it originally in connection with the unauthorised use. So at least, have you done any calculations related to the volume? Is the rear any higher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, if I take you to the historic photograph here, which would show the side of the building dropping down, we have a very similar elevation here with the side of the building dropping down. So as near as damn it on the evidence in front of officers, we are of the opinion that this building is not materially larger, and the existing plans we have on file, albeit labelled existing in the report, and maybe they shouldn't be labelled as existing, is as fair a representation as of that original building, be it volume, height at the front, height at the back, width, as we can get to. So on the evidence in front of officers, we consider that this building, the measurements we have are the most accurate ones we can present this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we were already told a short while ago, in fact, that I assume it's the front of the building, 3.1 metres in height, is the same as the original pole barn. And I think looking at the sloping roof I rather assume that we could be assured that the rear height is the same between the pole barn and that building which is currently on site. Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I went on a very lengthy site visit a number of years ago, and I remember this very, very well. And whilst the applicants are suggesting that this proposed, or it has been built, development is not materially larger than was previously existing, I do recall on this site visit that there was a lot of evidence still relating to the barn that had been removed. And that led me at that time to believe that actually it is larger than that which had existed previously. And I have to say that Mr. Jones's description of the original building really coincides with my memories and my thoughts on how that building was or had been before it was demolished and prior to our visit. Okay, it does appear, there appears to be some evidence that actually it's not materially larger, but I would say that this is a very, very different design to and construction as to what had been there previously. An original pole barn, as we can see there, and what has been constructed is very significantly different to that. Excuse me. And I believe that it should be refused on Greenbelt's terms. It really does fail to enhance and conserve the appearance of the conservation area. One might suggest that a woodyard is perhaps a rural occupation, and this is a very rural and very beautiful area. But I don't feel that what has been put up in this place in any way enhances that particular area. I not only went on that long site visit, but I have been back fairly recently to have another look, and I was reminded to my cost, trying to drive to the site. The Church Road, I beg your pardon, is a very, very narrow lane and it's just not suitable for off-street parking. There are very few parking spaces on the site, and I feel by the very nature of this business, and that it's going to be 2 units now, that there will be an increase in the traffic movements to the site. And I failed to see how the visitors to the site can be safely accommodated and without causing a huge amount of inconvenience to the residents in the area. So obviously I will be listening to the rest of the debate, but my feeling is, at the moment is, I'm sorry, officers, but I don't feel that I can support your recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ellis. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Much of what I was going to say has been covered by Councillor Ellis. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that she's just said. And I have to say that, I mean, as a lay person and not as an experienced planning officer, I struggle to recognise what we see before us as a building at all. But that's just my own personal opinion. If you say it's a building, then it's a building. But I agree wholeheartedly with what Councillor Ellis has just said, and I think I'm minded at the moment to not agree with the officers.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. There are 2 questions I really wanted to ask before I comment further. Firstly, we have the certificate of lawfulness, which I know some of the objectors say is, was obtained on information that wasn't correct, but we're lumbered with it, so to speak. But that, of course, was use of a barn for use as a contractor's yard and sawmill. And presumably, now that they're wanting to divide it up into 2 units, we are into a different ballgame, because it's 2 units rather than 1. The certificate of lawfulness only covers 1 unit. Am I right in assuming, therefore, that that could be something which we should take into account? And secondly, in my view, there's a difference between a carport and a garage, in that the volume is enclosed in a garage, and a carport, the volume is not enclosed and is open to the elements. And are we, when we're dealing with material change in size, got to take into account what the original building would have been if it had been bricked up or boarded up, as distinct from seeing fresh air right from the front through to the back? Because it does seem to me a very different building. We've already acknowledged that it's a very different building than the original one, because I'm convinced that, well, I'll give my comments later, but can we distinguish between volume which is open air and volume that's enclosed when dealing with this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, with regards to point number 1, the subdivision of the site into 2 uses would still both be B2 uses. So, the only change of use there would be if it was materially more intensified use, which is notoriously difficult to assess and to come up to a conclusion that would have needed permission in its own right, because that certificate of lawfulness covers the land as well as the previous building. So the use of the land for purposes of general industrial could have been separated into 2, and it may not have required planning permission. On your second point about materially larger, the National Planning Policy Framework is its usual ambiguous self. It just says at paragraph 89, the building cannot be materially larger, and that is a subjective matter, which members may take all sorts of factors into account, and that could be a matter you do take into account. But really, ordinarily, it would be the building in 3D form is that 3D form increasing to a materially larger extent. But there is an area of subjectivity there.
Chairman, just to add to that, I think our long experience of dealing with the test materially larger, which of course also preceded the NPPF, has been really in respect of pure size dimensions as opposed to the openness of a structure in terms of bays versus enclosed form. There have been examples where some inspectors have indicated that a building may appear to be of a different size because it has more open spaces, but generally speaking, the experience has been consistently that the tests of materially larger are about floor area, footprint, width, height, and volume. So physical size dimensions as in the ordinary meaning of the word. Thank you, Chairman.
Answers your questions, Mr. Goodrich?
Well, I think I've had 2 answers to the second question. One answer was it's subjective and we've got to take a subjective view on it, and the other one is perhaps not quite so subjective. I'm still confused.
Chairman, just to clarify, I think I'd agree that ultimately the judgment is one for the committee as to whether or not the building is materially larger, but I think we are agreed. I don't think I'm disagreeing with Barry's advice, but the test of materially larger is about size as opposed to design. That's the point I'm making, and that's a long-established point in the planning test. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Byam.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this clearly is a case of trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And unfortunately, a lot of the sow's ear is missing, or was missing, and they was constructed larger. And I still can accept the statements that are being made by long-standing residents of the area, of the village, that there is a substantial change in its size. And when we did our site visit, in walking around that building, that covering, it was clear to me that there was quite a change in that. So I'm totally baffled as to why we would want to accept a building of this nature in this position, providing the services perhaps that they wish to do from the unknown occupants of the building. And the other question I have is as to whether there are any forms, there should be forms of building control and other things in terms of the types of building and the standards of structure, etc., to allow a building to be used for office and other uses rather than as just a woodyard. Clearly as a woodyard you need open space, you need air going through to dry the wood and to keep it, to mature the timber. Here we've got a totally different usage. I was absolutely appalled at the site, first of all by the increases in size that I personally felt had happened, and secondly the very limited size of the site to support the activities that would be wished to have for 2 units on that site, and I believe just one extension building with 1 toilet to cover 2 separate units. It's Dickensian. Will the little sheds up in the hills that have sheep, where sheep can rest or shelter, be now counted as industrial buildings, and therefore we can allow those to be built into whatever type of industrial use or perhaps residential use that we are? Clearly not. This is totally away from anything that I've ever dealt with before in the 20 years I've been here in trying to reuse a totally inadequate building and to make it into a commercial venture.
Thank you very much. I thought you were reaching for the microphone again, Mr. Goodrich. Did you have...
Yeah, well, having asked the questions, I'd like to now comment. I mean, it seems to me that we start from the premise that if this was a blank site and somebody applied for planning permission for what is being sought today, we wouldn't grant it for 101 reasons. And the only reason that this matter is even being considered is because of the history of the building that was there already, and the fact that in 2013 a certificate of lawfulness was issued. And I still take the point that on the certificate of lawfulness, that using the wording that's on our papers on page 9, for use as a contractor's yard and sawmill, is very different than what is being proposed now, accepting that the use class B2 is still applicable. The second thing I take is that being subjective, looking at that and looking at what is now being erected contrary to planning is very different. And I do think that when one is looking at a building that was totally open, or just about open on all sides, is a very different kettle of fish than an enclosed building, albeit that if planks had been put against those upright posts, that the volume might have been little different than is currently being proposed. I do think it's being subjective that there is a material change in the size of the building, and that it is dangerous to take floor areas, take volume when the volume's not enclosed, and it does give a totally different impression when one looks at that photograph, as I said, to what is being proposed. I think by having 2 units, there's going to be more use, because there'll be presumably 2 different operators operating out of this place, when it was quite clear when the certificate of lawfulness was obtained that it was one use of one occupier using the premises. I am not at all happy with this application, and subject to what I may hear subsequently, I'm not minded, I'm afraid, to go with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Holder.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that I'm confused here, because under compliance with the Green Belt policy, all new builds in the green belt, and in particular in areas of outstanding natural beauty and great landscape value, should be for the use of agriculture and forestry. And as this was originally a sawmill, it complied with that policy. This present use for 2 workshops doesn't seem to comply in any way with it, and I would have thought it totally an inappropriate development in an area of outstanding natural beauty. So I will be opposing the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. No other speakers? Mr. Gates.
Yes, I think some wise things have been said, and I think there's a good point made on page 34 of the agenda where Sarah Sullivan concludes that the new building would result in substantial harm to designated heritage assets if it fails to conserve or enhance the appearance of the conservation area in the setting listed and non-heritage assets. I think that's a perfectly sound reason for rejecting this. I'm only saying this in a sense as devil's advocate, because the answer is I don't know, and I'm very interested that my members, my colleagues have such great certainty about this. I don't know whether it is bigger or not. I don't have the evidence in either direction, and that was precisely what the inspector said when he dealt with the appeal. He dismissed it on different grounds. Therefore, I'm merely saying here that in putting forward the view that it is not that it is materially larger, I think we have to be relatively certain of the wording of that. It's difficult to say that. I mean, I am not convinced that it is not materially larger, which is a bit different from saying that I am convinced that it is materially larger. If you're a bit semantic, maybe, but I hope members see what I mean, because there are facts out there. Aerial photographs are facts. Poles that can be measured are facts, and the facts are such that we could conclude that 6% is materially larger, but I'm looking for a form of words. If we use that as the reason, I'm looking for a form of words that perhaps doesn't convey total certitude, because I cannot personally have total certitude, if that's a word, that it's materially larger. If I accept that 6% is probably not materially large, I mean 10% might be, but 6% probably not. So I think there are very sound other reasons related to its appearance and its effect on conservation assets and so forth, but that the issue of size is one that I would not personally put top of the list. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gates. Mr. Steadick.
Thank you, Chairman. Only if I can help out on the size. Having spent most of my life working in the construction industry and around those things, just I'm taking it that these historic photographs are genuine, and counting the sheets and knowing the height and of the equipment that's in those sheds, I'm ascertaining that that historic picture is in the region of probably 17 or 18 metres long, and I would say 12 or 10 metres deep. How does that compare? I can't read the print. Sadly, at my age, my eyesight's not good enough to read that. But what's the dimensions of the new building?
206 square metres.
No, I'm talking about length and depth.
Oh.
We'll give you the same thing, but we know. I'm just talking about roof area. Thank you, Chairman.
William should just get the plans out so we can measure the, or have the readings off the plans. We should take a moment.
The point I'm making is it will give us some guide on the size.
the proposal is for a building of 18.85 metres in width and 10.475 metres in depth. So not too dissimilar to what you've said.
Well, I'm basing that opinion on just looking at those historic photographs and counting the sheets. That's all I'm doing. And that's, if I was asked to assess that, I would, that's where I would pitch it. So if it helps my colleagues on the size, I would say that's not any larger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stennett. Any other speakers? I suppose, members, I look back to 2013 when two applications for this particular site were considered. The first one, 0913, when a certificate of lawfulness was issued. I know that we did actually visit, we carried out a site visit here, and I cannot remember for the life of me which one of these two applications, 0913 or 2137, we actually considered in this chamber. But I know that we did consider one, whether it was the certificate of lawfulness or the change of use from Class B to Form 2 units. I suppose if I look at that later one, 2137, I find it significant that that application to Form 2 units and the erection of extension, which I assume would have been the small kitchenette and the toilet, it was refused, it was appealed, and that appeal was dismissed as well. I feel that there is something material in that which leads me to, I think, go with the majority of members on this committee in reaching a decision. However, let me take you to the update sheet. On page 3, there is a revised recommendation that permission be granted subject to the conditions set out on pages 25 to 28 of the agenda, agendas 1 to 5 on pages 28 and 29 of the agenda, and that additional informative, which I shall label number 6, the officer's recommendation is that permission be granted. Can I see those in favour of the officer's recommendation? None. Those against? Okay. I assume you're abstaining, Mr. Stennett. Okay. So we do not go with the officers. Somebody care to propose an alternative recommendation, please?
Someone's got to
Mr.
come up with something. The application be refused would be a good start, on the grounds that, well, two bases I would suggest, and I ask for officers' assistance. One is that an intensification of the use by having two units, which would appear to be on the lines of the appeal dismissal on 2137, which was 2 units, and they're applying for 2 units now. And secondly, that that the size of the proposed building, bearing in mind it's now enclosed rather than open, is a material change of size, material change in the size of the building. And I think, quoting all the the green belt stuff as well, and AOB, and that there's a presumption against planning permission in any event. Therefore the onus is on the applicant rather than anybody else, bearing in mind the position of the building. Now that's a long waffly thing which is not good enough for putting objections, but those seem to me to be the things that should be included in the refusal.
I'm sure that our officers could whittle it down to something very appropriate, and I
give them plenty and they can whittle it down. If you don't give them anything, it's a problem.
I believe Elizabeth is about to do it for us.
Chairman, thank you. I would actually guard against both of those particular matters, Councillor Goodridge, and I'll explain why. In the first instance, I think it would be very difficult to, on the back of this certificate of lawfulness, argue that this was a material intensification of use, because in doing that you would have to demonstrate material planning harm that would arise over and above the position that had been established by the certificate of lawfulness. So on that I would suggest that wouldn't be your strongest concern. And in relation to the size query, I understand entirely what you said, and in relation to the previous discussion, I would suggest perhaps your concern in terms of enclosing the building is more relevant in terms of the impact on the openness of the green belt, in that there can be a perception of loss of openness with buildings being enclosed, because you lose through views and you lose a sense of space, and that has been a line previously taken by this authority and indeed supported on appeal by inspectors who felt that enclosing buildings can affect openness. So I personally think that would be stronger than actually arguing that it's harmful strictly by virtue of an increase in size. That would be my advice. But what I would say, taking your point in terms of concern on design and enclosure and picking up some of the other comments that have been raised by members, I would suggest you probably have another strong argument that you're concerned about the alterations that have been carried out and their effect on the character of the amenity of the area in the Greenbelt, and in particular picking up Councillor Gates' point that it would adversely affect the heritage asset, which is conservation area, by virtue of its design and impact that's been carried out. So you've sort of got two reasons there: openness of the Greenbelt and impact on the character of the conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Very happy with that, Mr. Chairman.
So am I. We need now is a seconder for your proposal. Oh, we have one already. Yes, please do.
It doesn't seem to deal with the aspect of materially larger, because that by itself would be a fairly powerful reason. I'm not entirely there, and I know this is unpopular, I'm not entirely there to say that that is a positive reason, but I felt, fairness to my colleagues, I ought to mention that that's not mentioned, doesn't appear to be mentioned at all. Maybe there are some words that could be put into that as a subsidiary reason that members are not convinced that it is not. I'm sorry, I'm using double negatives, but it's more. I think they may be necessary rather than say members are convinced it is materially larger.
Not convinced that it's not.
Yes.
May I suggest you combine it in one Greenbelt reason to pick up the point on a loss of openness, but to combine it also with a concern that you're not satisfied that it has not resulted in a materially larger building. But if it's in one reason, I think it would stand more chance of being a robust reason for refusal on appeal than pulling it out and dealing with it separately, in the absence of, I'm afraid to say, unequivocal evidence of knowing exactly what that footprint was, although obviously we have tried to persuade you, but I do understand your concern. There isn't any outright plan evidence of exactly what that size of that building was, so I think that would take into account the fact you're not satisfied that you have had sufficient evidence to satisfy you it isn't materially larger, which is probably a triple negative. But I'm sure we can phrase something along those lines, Chairman, to support that. Thank you.
Might it also be said, Elizabeth, that an open-fronted pole barn with a somewhat rural industry, such as a timber yard, could be acceptable in the green belt and probably in a conservation area as well, but a closed-fronted building with those doors and so on urbanises a site to some extent and is detrimental both to the green belt and the conservation area.
Certainly, Chairman, we can bring that into the justification for it. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, we're almost getting back into a debate again rather than reasons for refusal, but to me it's over-intensification of use of the site, and a lot of that is around the size of the plot to support those two buildings. Looking at that site, it's extremely tight, and the space for vehicular movement into there, bearing in mind the restrictions that we must have on the would have to have on the use of the road for either parking or whatever, makes it a very difficult bit. So I don't think that for anything else that the size of the site can support the activity that is proposed.
One thing we need to be careful of course, is the inspector dealt with a number of these issues last time when he looked at it, and the inspector decided that there was no highway safety or parking issues associated with the reuse of the buildings. The inspector also decided that the reuse of the building that's there now would not have a negative impact on the conservation area or any settings of listed buildings. So I suppose we should have that in mind when we're constructing our reason for refusal.
Sorry to come back, but in that connection, if you look at page 29 of the update, which is page 3 of the inspector's report, the inspector rather agrees with us in saying whether these works have resulted in a larger building cannot reasonably be assessed from the photographic and mapping evidence. And he goes on to say, accordingly, I've attached limited weight to the claims made by local residents. I think that's a positive point. He has attached some weight rather than none. And so I think the right wording for this related to, rather than the blank statement that we are convinced, because I wouldn't be able to support the fact I've just got to be fair and say I'm not convinced, but I'm not convinced either way, therefore I'm not convinced that it's not. Sorry to go on about this, but we are looking at the potential for an appeal, and we do have to have the grounds that are going to be sustainable. And that comment by the previous inspector I think is helpful.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gates. You've written an awful lot, Elizabeth. Do you think that we have sufficient reasons for supporting a refusal?
Well, I'd just go back, Chairman, to suggesting the two reasons, one on heritage grounds and one on greenbelt grounds, to pick up the point about uncertainty about size, but also to make reference to the openness, but set in the context of the fact that those matters have been previously considered by the inspector, but members are coming at it afresh, taking into account that decision and forming their view on this current application.
Okay. Okay, members, we do have a recommendation for refusal. We have some sound reasons to support it, and that recommendation has been seconded. Can I see those members in support of that recommendation, please? And those against? Another abstention, Mr. Stennett. Okay. Then permission is refused. Let's move on then to item pulled a few hen's teeth there.
Pardon?
Pulled a few hen's teeth there. I think the majority of the audience will be leaving happy.
Yeah. And we'll get voted in by now.
Yes, Hascombe is not my ward.
No, but it all helps, doesn't it?
When you're ready, Mr. Holder. Moving on then, ladies and gentlemen, item B1, WA 2014/2074. the erection of a detached garage and outbuilding following the demolition of existing building and garage at Hullbrook Lane, Shamley Green. I was going to say Joe, but it's Barry.
I should pretend to be Joe. So the application is for the erection of a detached garage and outbuilding following the demolition of the existing studio and garage. The Hullbrook House is a large detached house located on the northern side of Hullbrook Lane to the west of the village of Shamley Green. The application involves these two buildings indicating on the screen in front of you. One is a garage, one is an artist's studio / outbuilding. Here we have a photograph of the outbuilding in question. Some members will note from reading the paper that this building was home to E.H. Shepherd and his illustrations of Winnie the Pooh and other such great works of fiction. So here we have the existing block plan, floor plan showing the garage, double garage, and the outbuilding I referred to. The application seeks removal of those buildings, the garage being 45 square metres and the studio building being 36 square metres, and its replacement with what we have in front of us now on screen. The proposed new garage would have a floor area of 42 square metres and a maximum height of 4.17 metres, and the studio would be 47.8 square metres with a height of 4.47 metres. Here we have the existing elevations of what's on site at the moment, this being the studio, this being the double garage. And then we have the proposed elevations. Excuse me. So here we have the garage is a simple detached two-storey garage, and the elevations of the artist's studio are reflective of the needs of having lots of light in and also paying respect to what went before it. Looking at the determining issues, on the left-hand side we have matters of technical judgment, that being the heritage asset. The building itself is not a listed building, it's a building of local merit, and it's a building of local merit because of its association with E.H. Shepherd. The Council's Historic Buildings Officer has looked at the scheme. He advises officers that the significance of this building is in its historical links, and that the replacement building is of a design which respects the previous design, the previous use as an artist studio, and is acceptable in planning terms. The new build is not so harmful so as to warrant refusal on heritage asset grounds. Looking at matters of judgment on the right-hand side, impact on Greenbelt, the studio building is materially larger than the building it replaces. In this application, we have no doubt about that. It is about 30% larger. However, and as such, it's inappropriate development, and as members know, that inappropriate development is harmful, and we're to give substantial weight to that harm, as directed by the framework. Landscape character, the site is well screened, and the two buildings are to be on a site that already has two buildings, albeit one of the buildings is smaller than what's proposed. Design and impact on visual amenity, the two buildings are commensurate with their functions. They are of a good design. The outbuilding for the artistic studio or artist studio is designed so as to respect what went before it. Looking at the very special circumstances, given that it is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt because it is materially larger, circumstances need to exist that outweigh the harm by reason of inappropriateness so as to amount to very special circumstances. In this case, we consider that the building of the size proposed it has been designed so as to sufficiently reproduce the form and detailing of the existing historic studio of E.H. Shepherd, which itself is of a poor state of repair, and also given that the replacement studio building would be on a part of the site that already has been previously developed and is well screened, and would not have a greater or materially greater impact on openness than the building it replaces. We think they are the considerations which outweigh the harm so as to amount to very special circumstances. Now, members will note that the Parish Council have raised some concerns with regards to the loss of the building and its impact on this heritage asset. Now, we've carefully considered the comments of the Parish Council. Note that the Parish Council is not anti the replacement of the existing structure. They acknowledge that it does need to be replaced. But following conversations and discussions with the Historic Buildings Officer, we consider that the replacement building keeps the connection with E.H. Shepherd would not have such a huge impact on heritage assets, because the asset it's with its connection with the person as opposed to its architectural design, and we think that that connection can go forward. If I take you now to the update sheet, which I think tells me that there is no update, so sorry for taking you to the update sheet. And then we have the recommendation is as on page 50, which is that subject to consideration of any further representations by the 18th of March, that should say 2015, and no material issues being raised, permission be granted subject to the conditions as set out on the main agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry. Members? Mr. Gates.
Well, only to say that I agree entirely with the officers, and I'm pleased to see condition 3, because that would have been the only reason that I might have had some concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No more speakers? Let's go to page 50 then. There you are. Subject to any further representations by the 18th of March this year, and no new material issues being raised, the officer's recommendation is that permission be granted. Can I see those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please? Don't need to ask those opposed. Permission is granted. Item B2, WA 2014/2379, the erection of a detached dwelling and garage at land at Eldon Farm, Elmbridge Road, Cranleigh. Barry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So next on the agenda is for the erection of a detached dwelling and garage on land at Eldon Farm, Elmbridge Road, Cranleigh. Here we have in front is a location plan. Eldon Farm is located to the southern side of Elmbridge Road, to the west of Cranleigh. The site measures about 0.6 hectares and is accessed by a single track that serves a number of other dwellings in the old schoolhouse, as indicating on the screen. The site, as you can see, is largely vacant and overgrown, with a former stable block located towards the southwestern corner. Although unclear on the planning records, it would appear that the lawful use of the site is residential as established under a previous planning permission, WA 2013-0404, which itself was for the erection of a new dwelling. Here we have the proposed block plan. The application is for erection of a detached 2-storey, 5-bedroom dwelling and detached 3-bay garage. Here we have the said proposed dwelling and garage. Here we have the proposed elevations. It is a building of the Surrey vernacular. It is a large building. This dwelling would be in place of a dwelling that was permitted in 2013. Here we have the floor plans and the proposed garage. Now, if I take you through the determining issues, on the left-hand side we have planning history and differences with the previous proposal. Now, members will note on pages 56 and 57 of the agenda, this site has quite the history. I suppose of most importance is the permission given in 2013, which was for a new planning permission to replace permission was granted in 2010, but in all intents and purposes that gave permission for a dwelling house, a 2-storey dwelling house. Now, in 2013, an application came in for the erection of a new dwelling. That was refused in January. It was refused on the grounds that it was materially larger than the building it was seeking to replace, that it would have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the countryside, and that the applicants have failed to enter into a legal agreement to pay any planning infrastructure contribution. Now, the planning inspector, in his dismissal of the appeal, decided that the dwelling would not have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area, and that it would be acceptable. However, he dismissed the appeal because at that point in time we still had a planning infrastructure contribution to be paid and the applicants were not willing to pay it. The dwelling we have in front of us now for consideration is the same dwelling that the appeal inspector assessed back in 2014. The only issue we have outstanding is that of the planning infrastructure contribution, which members will know as of November 2014 we can no longer seek contributions on dwellings proposals such as we have in front of us. So with regard to the history and differences with previous proposals, this is exactly the same as what the inspector saw. The inspector's only issue was them not paying PIC. They now don't have to pay PIC, so all the issues in front of the inspector have now been solved. Looking at matters of principle and technical judgment, housing supply, members will know that we don't have a 5-year housing land supply. This proposal would help in meeting our 5-year housing land supply, of course, being only 1, and we being 3.7 years as opposed to 5, it will make rather a small contribution, but a contribution nonetheless. Infrastructure contributions I've already alluded to, they're no longer a requirement as of November last year. Looking on the right-hand side, matters of judgment, impact on countryside and visual amenity. From a design point of view, it is of the Surrey vernacular, it is of a nice design, it is a large 5-bed house, and it's been designed to look like a large 5-bed country house. Officers have no issue with visual amenity. With regards to impact on countryside, we have to look back at what the inspector said in 2014, and he didn't highlight any issue with its impact on character and appearance of the countryside. Looking at residential amenity, the site is located sufficiently far away from any neighbours so as to cause no offence or any objection in that regard. Now taking you to the update sheet, which, yes, there is an update. There is a revised recommendation that, subject to the completion of a legal agreement within 2 months of the date of the committee, to secure the unimplemented part of planning permission reference 2013-0404 is not carried out in conjunction with the permission hereby granted, then permission be granted subject to conditions. The reason for that legal agreement is that the 2013 scheme has been partly implemented. So by having that legal agreement, it will ensure that they can't implement 2 houses on the site and they can only build the 1. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Barry. Mrs. Forozowski.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to officers for a very comprehensive report that explains this application very well and its history. I think it's regrettable that we find ourselves in the situation with regards to the contribution, but we are where we are. As we know, the site actually does have a lot of previous history, but the Parish Council has no objection. I think you've actually got it right. I think it's, as I say, regrettable in certain instances, but and does it add to our 5-year supply? Very, very minimal for those who are very, very wealthy. But I think it's a beautiful looking property, and I think it will enhance the area and it won't have any detrimental effect on anybody. But I'd say well done to the officers, and I fully support your recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. My colleague here has said much of what I wanted to say. There's a very long history associated with this site, and I do sincerely hope that actually something will soon be built so that we won't get another application coming to us that will be significantly larger. It appears to me, and forgive me if I'm being slightly cynical here, that they had permission for stables, which we refused for very good reason, which they actually got on appeal. But now they're not including the stables, and that appears to be put forward as a good reason as to why this property, the proposed property before us, should be even larger than has been proposed in the past. So I totally support the officer's recommendation and look forward very much to this property actually being built. And I do hope that there is some opportunity for us to suggest that we will not look too favourably on applications, perhaps to put, dare I say, stables, that sort of thing, in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellis. No other speakers? Let's go to page 67 then, members. Officer's recommendation is that subject to all those conditions and the informatives, permission be granted. Can I see those members in favour of? Oh. Page 3. Oh, a revised recommendation there, requiring the completion of a legal agreement within 2 months of the date of committee to secure that the unimplemented part of planning reference WA 2013/0404 is not carried out in conjunction with this permission, then permission be granted. Are we all in agreement with that? Mr. Byam? Thank you very much. Permission then is granted. Welcome, Hilary. We're on to page 75, members. Item B3, WA 2014/2299, the erection of a bridge to replace the existing causeway and associated works at Compasses Bridge, 3 Compasses Lane, Alfold. When you're ready, Hilary.
Thank you, Chairman. The causeway in question is at the southern entrance to Dunsfold Park from 3 Compasses Road, and you can see it there on the plan. At the moment, the Way and Arun Canal are unable to progress their restoration of the canal at this point because there is actually a causeway rather than a bridge, and the proposal is to replace that causeway with the bridge slightly to the southwest of the existing causeway so that there'll be minimum disruption. This plan shows the actual application site, which you can see is quite elongated. It includes the entrance, part of which is in Dunsfold Park, and the area to the south where the road will be slightly realigned. This plan is slightly more detailed in that it shows that the proposed gatehouse to Dunsfold Park, where the security officers are based, will be relocated slightly to the west. The road will be slightly realigned here, with the new bridge in this position here. The road will then join the existing road, and the causeway will be removed and replaced with some steps and a landscaped area, and there will be some notice boards and places for people to sit. So it'll be a sort of low-key, informal place for people to look at the canal and hopefully ultimately to watch the boats going through. The proposed bridge is a fairly simple design. This is an elevation, a cross-section through the bridge. This is the canal going through here. There'll be walls on either side, and then a fairly simple wooden fence arrangement at the top. This is a view of the causeway at the moment, and you can see how it prevents the flow of water through the canal. So this is the structure which will be removed. You can see on this photograph the existing security office, which will be slightly relocated. And here's another photograph. This shows the route of the new road, and this shows the existing route and the security office. There will be 1 or 2 trees, I think it's 9 in all, that will definitely have to be felled, possibly the odd 1 or 2 more. But it is a well-treed area, and obviously it's balancing the desire to restore the canal against the loss of trees. The determining issues are matters of principle and technical judgment are flooding and flood risk, and the Environment Agency have confirmed that they have no concerns. The site, despite being a canal, is not in flood zone 2 or flood zone 3. Highway issues. The Way and Arun Canal Trust have been working very closely with the County Highway Authority. They will be doing a Section 278 agreement with the view to the road being readopted. At the moment it is an adopted highway. It's being built to highway standards and ultimately will provide a new access to Dunsfold Park, whatever happens to Dunsfold Park. The next issue is heritage asset stroke archaeology. The Way and Arun Canal is, we consider, a heritage asset, although it's not as old as some of our heritage assets. It is nevertheless an important part of the economic history of the area. The Way and Arun Canal will be undertaking a watching brief while they're doing the work and will be liaising with the county archaeologist. In particular, they are going to be looking to see if they can find the original bridge that would have been there at the time when the canal was functioning, which they believe may be hidden somehow inside the causeway. So it'll be interesting to see what they find. Impact on trees, I've already mentioned. There will be the loss of some trees. The trees that will be retained will be protected, and an appropriate condition is recommended to deal with that. The next issue is biodiversity, and the Trust has provided comprehensive surveys and will be carrying out their work in compliance with those surveys, and hopefully ultimately improving the character of the area from a biodiversity point of view. Matters of judgment include the impact on the countryside beyond the green belt. Now, the policies do allow for infrastructure development, and this is, we consider to be an infrastructure development, but it will also have some visual impact, but hopefully you will agree that it is actually going to be an improvement and part of a very interesting project. As far as impact on residential amenity is concerned, the Trust have provided a comprehensive report as to how they will be carrying out the works. There is the Three Compasses mobile home park very close to the site, but the Trust have already spoken to representatives from the park and will continue to liaise with residents, and it's hoped that any disturbance will be not to the extent that it impacts on the enjoyment of the occupiers of those properties. In the long term, the road will be slightly removed from the properties, so in the long term I think there will be a slight positive benefit. Finally, there's the matter of the impact on the canal and the provision of leisure and tourist facilities. It will be a very low-key tourist facility at the moment, somewhere that somebody who's cycling through the area might linger for a few moments, or maybe somebody who's visiting the pub might take a little walk and have a look at the canal and what's happening. I understand that the Trust will be hoping to provide boat trips along that stretch of the canal, and in the long term we all hope that there will be a link from the River Way to the River Arun, and clearly without removing this causeway the canal can't function. So the recommendation, well, you will see that first of all I just refer you to the update sheets. Page 4 of the update sheet. You'll see Woolfold Parish Council has no objection to the application, and Thames Water has no objection but want an informative to be added to the permission if granted, because there is a water main crossing the causeway, and clearly that has to be accommodated, and that would obviously be at the applicant's expense, and it will be their responsibility to sort that out. The responses from Orfold and Thames Water do not raise any new issues, so the revised recommendation is that permission be granted subject to the conditions and informatives listed on pages 91 to 95 of the agenda, with the additional informative recommended by Thames Water. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Mr. Byam.
The reason I was being more enthusiastic than normal, perhaps, is the fact that I ought to perhaps declare an interest in that I'm the Waverley representative on the Way and Anna Canal Trust, and so obviously been kept informed and involved to some degree in what was being proposed, but other than that, of course, it's in Mary's ward, and she and I have talked about various things. I think it's a bit like the ducks that are going to be floating on the canal at some stage, or in the water there. It all looks very peaceful on the surface, all the activities underwater, when they dig out the existing causeway and create a new bridge. So at the end you won't see a lot of difference, except a slightly more pleasant area at low level. I'm obviously very much in favour of this application.
Thank you very much. The Way and Anna Canal moves closer and closer towards the Riverway. Only Bramley stands in its way now I think, apart from this. Mrs. Forozewski.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I just start off by saying a very well done to officers tonight. I know it's been a difficult evening for you with technical failures, and poor Barry. I mean, you've coped admirably. You really have. So I think well done to you all. It wasn't easy, but fair play to you. Absolutely, fully support this. I've had nothing but compliments and people really wanting to see this go ahead. I just wanted to say that although Dunsfold Park was mentioned, it has no bearing on anything to do with Dunsfold Park, because there's already an entrance and an exit there. And I did actually write down here, I did want to thank Maurice, because he was instrumental in helping me understand and get to know a bit more about this. So I thank you very, very much. It was very, very useful information, and I think we're both delighted to see this application before us and a recommendation for approval. In terms of residential amenity, I don't believe that it will have an impact, because the Compasses, as Hilary quite rightly said, is in close proximity. It is a reasonable distance away from you to actually enjoy the challenges and the changes ahead, as opposed to be inflicted problems upon them. Interestingly enough, potentially with the work that they're actually doing, if future restoration works continues, it could have a positive impact on surface water flooding in the future. So I think that is quite a positive outcome from this as well. But thank you very much, and again thank you to Maurice. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Mr. Sorry. Momentary lapse of memory. Mr. Holder.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I've also been a strong supporter of the Way and Arun Canal Trust, and I've been invited on several occasions on their boats. And I'm glad to say that when this bridge is completed, it will extend the canal to Knighton's Lane in Dunsfold, which will allow the occupants of Dunsfold to enjoy the canal. And I think it's a brilliant scheme, and I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you very much. No other speakers? Let's move to page 4 of the update sheet, please. I have a revised recommendation there that Hilary has already read out, so I won't read it again. Can I see those members in favour of the revised recommendation, please? Obviously everybody. Nobody against. Permission is granted. I think, members, we are now done. Thank you for the time. Have a safe journey home.